Welcome, everyone. This is a special broadcast at NCA. We have Anne Marie Waters with us. She's the leader and of For Britain, which is an exciting emerging party there, which is very similar to NCA. NCA is 100% grassroots, 100% non-establishment, and I can say with confidence, Anne Marie, that For Britain is coming from the same angle as well. I did read all your policies. It reminds me of NCA when we were first starting out, like the core structure of what you were looking at. Um, and it's all about the people. What's in the best interest of the people? In your case, Britain. In our case, Canada. I just want to talk to the audience. We're going to try to address some of the comments as they come in, but NCA may do a follow-up video on the comments. We may, if there's time, look over at them and address them. They are important, so please leave your feedback for both myself and Anne Marie. And I can speak for Anne Marie here as well. As a grassroots non-establishment party, public participation is vital to what we're doing. It's almost a lifeblood. The comments coming in, the feedback, Anne Marie,
Mhm.
you would agree with that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so today we're going to look at three core areas and then kind of branch it off from there depending on the time. We only have 1 hour. The first one, obviously, most important is the economy. And we're going to talk about inflation in Canada, UK, Britain, worldwide. Then we're going to link that into Ukraine, Russia, what's going on there on the ground, but also globally. There's some big things going on in Russia, Ukraine that we need to discuss about. And we need to talk about the current government in the UK. They're very belligerent from my standpoint and CA's standpoint. And maybe you can talk about that too, Anne Marie. And then we're going to talk about even bigger agenda here, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and how that is impacting the people in Britain, Canada, and worldwide. We know this is a worldwide phenomena, and I can speak on Anne Marie's part. We're doing this because we care about people, we care about humanity. We're very disturbed about where this our countries are headed, where the world is headed, and we're speaking up, and that's why we're doing it, Anne Marie. Do you want to add anything before we get into economy?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say about all of these issues really is that we don't actually know what's going on. And the reason we don't know what's going on is because we don't have a press that is independent and that is telling us objectively, dispassionately, telling us the facts. So we can only offer opinions on what we see. And equally, toward the mainstream press doesn't tell us the truth. You also have on social media, on the internet more broadly, lots of opinions being expressed. And you don't know what of those are true either. So effectively, we are in the dark about what is really going on in the world in every respect. So we can only speculate. We can only offer opinions. And that's what we'll be doing in the next hour, in my view,
Yeah.
is speculating because we don't have the truth. We
Yeah,
simply
yeah, that's totally failed. The Canadian media, I call it the Western deep state media overall, with the Ukraine, Russia. Just to look at that, it's just a wall of propaganda, right?
don't.
And th-
Absolutely.
and then we look at the lockdown, all the programming and censorship. But then it was before that there was other issues. So, but there are facts out there, Anne Marie, and we're going to talk about them today. There are documents, there are actual treaties and agendas.
Yeah.
There's valuable independent sources that we rely on at NCA. We do not rely on the mainstream media at all. I'm going to be honest, they vilify us, they ignore us, they are not our friend. It's just a reality. I don't think they're the friend of the people at
No,
all,
no.
right?
They are
So,
the enemy.
yeah, but there are facts out there in which we can build off, right?
Okay.
Like, I'll give you an example. There was a Davos meeting. No one's denying that.
Mm-hmm.
NATO's been encroaching on Ukraine. That no one's going to deny that. It's been going on for X number of years, right?
Yeah.
And then you could look at you can go on from there. You can build up some factual sense of what's going on, right? You can look at the legislation. You can look at UN Agenda 2030. That's not a made up document. UN Agenda 21, right? And kind of piece it together. You can look at the actions of these politicians and piece it together. It's like Boris Johnson going on about nanotechnology about a year ago at the UN and how great it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but I want to talk about the economy because there are some facts there. Canada, like UK, US, Anne-Marie, we're in deep historic inflation right now. The last reading in the US was 8.6%. Canada's close to 7%. The CPI number, Consumer Price Index, has been manipulated over the years, so it's lower than what it appears.
That's
right.
That's an example of what I was saying, really.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting facts don't exist. I'm saying things are
Yeah.
constantly manipulated to make us think life is going
Completely.
one way.
But we know it's higher.
No.
You just ask the average person in Britain or Canada shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I go shopping now, across the board, everything is at least $1 Canadian higher or more.
Yeah.
And that's without even looking at the cost to fill up your vehicle. Right now, where I live, it's $1.91 per liter of gas. So for me, if I go back a year, that's increased. I'm paying almost $30, $40 more at the pump just to fill up.
Mm. We're paying apparently about £12 more than we were a few weeks ago at the moment. You can notice it yourself. I notice it in my own car. Like you, I notice it when I go shopping, and they're not just small. They're not small increases in prices. They're very large increases in prices. A lot of it is tax. Huge amounts of it are tax, and it's the same with petrol, diesel. There's a huge amount of tax on these things, and the government therefore has it within their power to reduce the cost of essentials in life, but they don't. And they don't for a few reasons. One, our Conservative government said they want a high tax, high spend economy. Does that sound conservative to you? This is also a so-called Conservative party that when our culture, our history and identity were under sustained criminal attack by Black Lives Matter a couple of years ago, the Conservative government bowed down to Black Lives Matter at the expense of British identity, tradition, culture. None of this is conservative. Now, they are conservative in name only, including economically. Yeah. No Conservative party would call for a high tax, high spend economy. They have completely given up on conservative economic policies and philosophies, all of it. It's all gone. There's no British conservatism anymore. The reason is because they are no longer governing us. They are putting on a show, pretending to govern us, when actually they are taking their orders from outside. So it works a bit like this. You have globalist bodies like the United Nations, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, etc., etc. They are telling our leaders what to do. Those leaders are doing it at the expense of the people who they were elected to represent. The press lies to us all the time. The press and the mainstream politicians are the same. I say this all the time, but it's true. I'm not joking. They all drink in the same wine bars in London. They all know each other. They are friends. They are the elite, the political elite, the media elite. They are happy to keep the status quo, to keep themselves in power, the press make sure the mainstream politicians are effectively untouchable by, if they give us any coverage at all, attacking us as conspiracy theorists, fruitcakes, racists, fascists, neo-Nazi, far right. That's what they call us. So they make sure that people are too afraid to listen to what we have to say. So they keep the political elite in place, and they keep themselves in place. So you have at the top of the ladder the globalist bodies telling our elected politicians what to do. The press keeps those elected politicians in power, and so the people are the victims, the powerless victims at the bottom of the ladder in all of this. The problem, of course, I say victims, but essentially people still do have the power to change this. They're just so brainwashed by the media political establishment. They have forgotten. They completely they don't understand that they have the power to change this. They are in actuality full of fear. That's what people, they are terrified to say the wrong thing, to think the wrong thoughts, to make the wrong actions. What will I can't, I'm too frightened. They won't verbalize that in most cases, but they are. People are terrified. And when the lockdown happened, we had a situation where our politicians were telling us when we could leave the house, who we could speak to. We had the Home Secretary here, one of the most senior politicians. I don't know if I know your system is similar, but I'm not sure if you have a Home Secretary, but one of the most senior politicians in government telling people not to speak to their neighbors. And if you see someone speaking to their neighbors, to report them to the police. She said this on the radio. We had the police threatening to go through our shopping baskets to see what we were buying. So infantilized did we become during that period. Infantilized, frightened children looking to the government. What are you going to let me do today? Am I allowed to go out today? Am I allowed to visit a sick person? And the relationship between the powerful and the people was completely altered beyond all recognition. Now we are frightened children looking to the politicians to ask them, what are you letting us do? What are we allowed to do today? And being grateful when they allow us to do simple things. Isn't it great we're allowed to go to a restaurant again? Being grateful completely transformed us.
Yes. And I would say almost 99, if not 100% of what you said applies to Canada.
Yeah.
It's important people understand the World Economic Forum and how this links in. They have what's called a Young Globalist program.
Yeah.
These are literally Manchurian candidates. Half of the current government in Ottawa, Anne-Marie, are Young Globalist disciples. The finance minister is on the some executive board of WEF. Incidentally, she has ties to neo-Nazis in Ukraine as well. But I want to praise a lot of Canadians, some of them who stood up to these draconian lockdown that took place, the truckers. But the vilification is real. NCA has been completely vilified as well, the same as your party. This is the way they tried to kick us down, to stop the people from supporting us. Anne-Marie, it's the same here. I've been called far right, you name it. Conspiracy theorists, everything, racist. I wrote a few years ago, I created a lot of awareness about ISIS and what they were doing, yet I'm called racist, bigot, whatever. This is the way they do it. We've had a situation in Canada, media was actually appointed to the Senate. That's how in bed they are. Our governments are giving about $1 billion a year to mainstream media. Literally, they're literally giving them money, Anne-Marie. But I have to mention one thing, one other layer that's going on is division. The cornerstone of this dictatorship in Britain, in Canada, US, most of the West is premised on division.
Yes.
Left, right, liberal, labor, conservative, vaccinated, non-vaccinated, and it
And
just goes.
particularly racial. I
Yes.
mean, you cannot watch a movie nowadays without there being some element of racial division being in it. I actually watched a film the other day. It was about, it was a disaster film about storm. Even in that, there was a Native American character who had to mention her Native Americanism several times throughout. It's everywhere now. Every television commercial, every soap opera, every drama, sport, even. The England football team, as you might have seen, still getting down on its knees to Black Lives Matter. It is everywhere you look. Now, I grew up in the 80s, and I can remember black characters on television or whatever it might be, and nobody noticed or cared that they were black. They were just now. It would, the commentariat would make a big issue out of someone being black, whereas back in the day, no one cared. It was just,
Yeah.
but racial division is a huge, and it is everywhere you turn all the time. A divided society is much easier to dictate to control. You turn black against white, and you have they're much easier to control because you're creating fear between black and white, and that's what's happening very much in the UK, and I know it is in America. I'm not sure how strong it is in Canada, but black against white is a huge thing here, and it is being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and race relations are at the worst they've been, because it is increasing the fear amongst us, and we're suspicious of each other in a way we haven't been before in my lifetime. And you can see that people who would never have had any racial thoughts or racial opinions are now forming them. They are deliberately creating racial tension and racial division.
Yes, 100. Yeah, 100% in Canada too. It's less black against white. It's more traditional white Canadian against newcomers,
Right.
and they tend to be from, let's say, brown or black skin color. Who cares? We don't care at NCA. We support all Canadians, as Anne-Marie's party does too. So this is a bunch of nonsense, but this is part of the division, Anne-Marie.
Yeah.
And anyone, as far as I'm concerned, anyone who identifies as, oh, I'm conservative, I'm labor, I'm liberal, you're already part of the program. And I know I can speak for Anne-Marie's party and ours. We don't identify as left or right. I don't identify. Why would I identify as conservative? It has no meaning except to program people. We are free-minded, right, Anne-Marie?
Right. Yeah.
And we look at all issues for the benefit of the people. It doesn't. But this is how these crooked politicians who are just puppets, right? It's just a stage, right?
It's a theater.
It's just a theater. But they're peons. If you know the bigger picture of BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, right? WEF, UN, World Bank, IMF, these politicians are peons.
The problem you've got, though, is that these things are both frightening and complex. And it's very difficult to get what's going on at the moment. To go back to the economy, what's going on at the moment with massive inflation, people can relate to that. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting people are incapable of understanding this stuff. I'm saying that they're not interested. They don't have the time. Most people are not going to look into the technicalities of the WEF or the World Bank, or the fact that the World Bank has actually plunged countries into poverty and keeps them there through debt, but that's another matter. People are not going to actually pay too much attention to that. So that's not where I go when I talk about policy. You need to reach the people, and if they can't afford to eat, you're going to reach them. And we are coming to a point where people will not be able to eat what they want to eat. Genuinely, it's going to, it could get very, very dark indeed. And I think that when people haven't got enough food, maybe the impetus that drives them, the only one perhaps, because crime isn't doing it, immigration isn't doing it, rape gangs isn't doing it, terror attacks isn't doing it. But when they can't afford to eat, they can no longer ignore what's going on around them. And it may be the impetus for political change. I sincerely hope it is. I do think that the globalist establishment may be overplaying its hand at the moment and pushing just that bit too far. They should slow down a bit. If they really want to, they ought to slow down a bit. But they're very arrogant, too arrogant to see that they're overplaying their hand. And they may just be pushing people just that bit too far. I hope that they are.
Yeah.
So,
and I want to just, the media information, if you listen to Biden and people like that, they blame Putin and Russia. That is complete lie and misdirection. It has contributed to higher commodity prices. But anyone who knows economics, inflation is linked fundamentally to debt, money creation. And the money creation in the West has been obscene, and it grossly accelerated during the lockdown. Canada is in debt nationally 1.67 trillion right now and growing. I know the US is over 30 trillion, and I read your numbers. I know Britain is deep in debt as well. And what happens, everyone, so you understand the connection? All that debt, all that money creation is devaluing the sterling or the Canadian dollar. Your purchasing power is going down. It's like a tax. It's baked in now. They can't do anything about it without increasing the interest rates to like 7, 8, 9%, but they'll crash the economy. We're in for a wild ride. It's out of control. It's completely irresponsible. Anne-Marie, what's going on?
we are governed by incompetence, and this is what people think. People have this low confidence themselves, and they look at the elites and they think, well, they must be really smart. They must be smarter than me. I know several working class people who would make a better job running the economy than the elite political class do. No question about it. There's common sense. And the debt, you rightly said, the debt, it's insane. No one can possibly pay this back. No one. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And even in the last couple of decades, if you look at the cost of housing in the last couple of decades and the debt that individuals are in and that businesses are in, it's unbelievable. Huge amounts of income, both household and business income, is spent paying off debt. We can't continue. At some point, some bubble has to burst. This money cannot be paid. It's impossible. It's numbers that the human mind can't even contemplate. We're governed insanely by people who are arrogant and incompetent, and we have been for a long time. We ought to get some working people in charge who know what it's like to budget, who know what it means to spend within their means. Just common sense is what we need, and we don't have it. We don't have it.
But that links into the political system, the multi-controlled system, Anne-Marie, and the media manipulation, right? And this is what we're battling against, and I know you're battling against. So they have the multi-controlled, labor and conservative, and here we have NDP, liberal, conservative, and even some other entities that are multi-controlled. So it doesn't matter. People ask, well, how come there's no change? Because you keep electing part of the multi-controlled, right?
There's no difference. There's no difference. Our two big parties, there's no difference between. They pretend there's a difference. We have the stage show in the House of Commons.
Yes, it's the same here.
They oppose each other. They attack each other. they don't, if one comes up with a policy, the other one will oppose the policy just because they came up with it. There's no discussion about what's right for the people or not. They came up with the policy, therefore we're against that policy. It's like a Punch and Judy show. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point, because I think here people are so beaten down, they feel kind of defeated, or they disvalue what they can offer, so they don't want to step forth, right?
Yeah, they lack
And
confidence.
yes,
They really do, and no one should ever underestimate the significance of confidence. If you have no confidence, if you are told, our education system, particularly in recent years, is dumbed down ridiculously. I mean, people are coming out of school barely able to write English. And don't get me started on grammar and punctuation. It's just completely dumbed down. But also there's a political element to schooling now, which tells British people that they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And there's a self-hatred, a really broad, wide self-hatred in this country, because of its past. And the British Empire and all this stuff is constantly drummed into children. So they lack confidence as British people, but they lack confidence in general, because if you're listening to the elites and they have all these money and these accents, and people will assume working class people have always doffed their cap at the one with the posh accent, when actually they're probably smarter than them and would probably do a better job. It's a human problem, but it's a human problem deliberately being made worse, I think, to disempower people. If you don't have any confidence, you have very little power.
yeah,
And we need to
exactly.
find that confidence. But
Yeah,
done.
and that links into the division and the smearing, and you're this, you're that, and yeah, we got to break through that. It's
Yeah.
identical here. The self-esteem of people, and if only they knew. But I'm just going to add one other thing, which is, unfortunately, it's not good based on what you said. On June 7th here, federally, in Ottawa, in the Commons, they passed legislation for what's called UBI, Universal Basic Income. This is tied into the reset, which we're going to talk about at the end of this, and the fourth industrial revolution, everyone here. Anne-Marie, this is quite disturbing. This is going to create, I'm sure you're aware, with this AI technocracy that they're pushing. We've had reports here, we're going to lose up to 40% of our jobs, maybe more, which is staggering. So what they're doing is they have the UBI now to prevent what you called out, because they know if it's around 30% unemployment or more, it tends to trigger a revolution, right? So they're doing this to prevent it, but also to control people. Anne-Marie, imagine all these people. Canada has about 38 million. If we take 40% of, let's say it's around 17 million people on it, and then they can control them, Anne-Marie, and say, well, we want you to take the third dab and the fourth dab. If you don't, you're not getting your UBI, right? We want you to watch an hour of mainstream news every night, right? Or you're not getting it, right? So they're so sneaky, Anne-Marie.
It's evil.
But we can't underestimate them, right? We
It's
can't underestimate them. This is coming, Anne-Marie. So your scenario, which is great, they're offsetting it through UBI, and I'm sure Britain's going to do it too, if not already.
No, it's been discussed in Wales, and Wales wants to be, this sanctuary city with sanctuary country. Very, very, very left wing Wales is, as is Scotland. England is a different kettle of fish, so they're not. I don't think they're going to go with this in England yet. But it's being talked about in Wales, so that's a dipping the toe in. But you're absolutely right. It is control. And you're right. I hadn't actually thought about it like that. But yeah, you're right. It
It's
will
scary.
stop. It'll stop It's what I was talking about. If people
Yeah.
haven't got enough to eat, they will revolt, and they're going to make sure people have enough to eat, so they don't. That goes back to
Yeah.
the Roman. I'm not sure which Roman emperor it was. Bread and circuses.
Something. Yeah.
Keep them
Someone
fed
mentioned
and
that.
entertained, and they'll be all right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's coming, and it's important. We're going to talk a bit more about this, but I want to just shift now to Ukraine and Russia.
Mm.
I want to let our audience know that if there was ever an example of Western propaganda, it's this Ukraine proxy war. They don't even call it that. Anne-Marie, we're very versed on what's going on there, and it has very significant geopolitical implications of what's going on. I just want to make a comment before I get into it with you. Your current foreign affairs minister, Truss.
Right.
I find her extremely belligerent. I know she's just a puppet of I
Mm.
call it the deep state in Britain, or the establish. I prefer deep state over establishment myself. But that's what she represents.
Mm.
She has been utterly belligerent, and she even supported publicly a global NATO, which is part of this unipolar world we're
Yeah.
dealing with out of the US, Anne Marie. Isn't that scary?
Yeah. But not surprising. Look, the UK, the Ukraine thing is genuinely mind blowing. I'm 44 years old. Never in my life, and there have been a lot of wars since I've been on this planet. And Britain has been involved in a lot of wars since I've been on this planet. I have never seen anything like this. Never. You won't see, there are more Ukrainian flags. Not at the moment, there are British flags flying because we've just had the Queen's Jubilee. So there's plenty of Union Jacks at the moment. But as a general rule, you are more likely in some places to see more Ukrainian flags than you are British flags. And when British troops are at war, you will not see our parliament standing up praising British troops. You will not see flags flying, Union Jacks flying in support of British troops. Nothing of the kind. But all of a sudden, a country which has really nothing to do with us is at war with another country which has nothing to do with us. And we have been told, conditioned repeatedly, over and over again, to support Ukraine in this war, to the point where our public, even my gym has Ukraine flag, and it's just insanity. I live near an old ship, a beautiful old ship, which is docked near where I live, and it's now flying a Ukrainian flag. And you go to the ATM and you're asked, do you want to give money to Ukraine? It's just constant. We have our politicians standing up in Parliament applauding something which is very unusual for the House of Commons, applauding Ukrainian Foreign Minister. What is going? This is, as you said, the definition of propaganda, and it's unprecedented. I have never seen anything like this before. And if we gave half the support to British troops when they're at war as we do to Ukraine, we'd be a lot more patriotic than we are. I've never seen, and that means I know that something is spectacularly wrong here. You mentioned NATO, and of course, the history of this is, with the unification of Germany and the end of the Soviet Union, the Russians were promised that there would be no expansion eastwards of NATO. It is now on Russia's door. Why? What do they expect to happen? They made assurances to Russia that there would be no expansion of NATO eastwards. Now, not only is NATO on its door, the European Union is on its door, in firing range of Russia. What
Yes.
do they expect to happen? What do they expect to happen? I just wish we had a single newspaper or television station that would go into the NATO expansion eastwards and Putin's thoughts about this. No one discusses it. I've not seen it discussed once in the mainstream press. And they're all, and it's almost like a Disney film. Good guy, bad guy. Ukraine, good guy. No issue, nothing to discuss. Ukraine is good. Russia's bad. And we're at the, we're so ridiculous that we are living in a country where apparently discrimination is the worst possible thing imaginable, but stopping Russians from going about their daily lives because they're Russian. And Chelsea Football Club, owned by Russian Abramovich, the government is limiting the sales of tickets they can sell to their football matches. It is stopping them selling merchandise, and because it's owned by a Russian. This is crazy. It is genuinely. I never thought I could see this in my lifetime. Now, the reasons for this I don't know, but one can express opinions. Perhaps Putin is a thorn in the side of the world government agenda, and he has to go. I think perhaps the end goal of all this is to get rid of Putin and replace him with a more pro-globalism leader, so that Russia can be brought along with the global agenda as well. That's the only thing that makes sense to me as to why they would go to all this trouble to demonize Russia and Putin. Is that he must be a thorn in their side. He must be.
Yes. That's consistent with our research. We go to a lot of independent sources. We follow one person from the UK, from the Duran. Very good. I recommend you and your followers to look into the Duran. Very good independent media. There's a organization called the Atlas Network, which is very good, providing good update. There's a very good site as well, people, if you want to get the facts on this, at least the closest to what's going on as possible. Russia Truth is very good, and that's something I follow. I actually prefer reading Russian media hands down over any West. I don't even look at Western media. To me, it's grotesque. But what they've done here, and I've listened to a lot of people, they've made the Western propaganda machine, Anne Marie, they made it emotional based, not factual based. They don't want anyone to know the history. So this is the world we're living in, Westerners. Everyday Westerners are suffering because of these globalist nutcases and these puppet politicians. I just want to touch on a couple other things, but like I said, I'm convinced that they want to do regime change in Russia. Was this a miscalculation? Were the Western sanctions a miscalculation? There's different viewpoints out there that it's according to plan to crash everything to bring the financial reset. I'm not sure either way, Anne Marie, on that, because I don't know. I kind of leaning towards a miscalculation, but maybe it is planned. Russia,
it's probably a mixture of the two,
Yeah, maybe.
It's probably a mixture. I mean, I said
I'm not sure.
Incompetence, and we are. So never underestimate the level of incompetence of these people, but never underestimate their ability to scheme and plot and perform trickery. It's a mixture of the two, I suspect.
Okay.
And incompetence.
So I just want to paint some context here, and I totally agree with Anne Marie. You got to look at it from the standpoint of Russia. NATO's lied, as Anne Marie said, they've been encroaching. I think they've added over 11 NATO countries since then. Then you got Zelensky, which is a puppet of the US and the EU, 100%. He's talking about nukes. He's talking about joining NATO, and he's on the border of Russia. Come on. Imagine if that was Mexico or Canada, and we were doing. You think the US would be friendly towards us? Come on, look.
Putin has made that point. If this was Canada or Mexico, would America be sitting back thinking, "Oh well"? Any country would
Yeah.
respond in some way. I'm not actually making a judgment one way or the other on Putin. I'm not a fan, but I'm a fan of the truth, and I'm a fan of consistency. What we expect from one country, we should expect from others. If there is absolutely no way that we shouldn't be discussing the expansion of NATO whispers, but we never do.
Yeah.
It's never used as any kind of a reason. Something else that's really interesting about this is Ukraine. You hear Ukrainians on television, and they talk about this is our soil, this is our land, blood and soil, and heritage and history, and we are the people, and we want our country, and we want Russians out. And I think to myself, Ukrainians are allowed their own soil and their own identity, but the rest of us, suddenly, when Ukrainians want their blood and their soil and their nation and their identity, it's great. Look at it, Ukraine, it's great. We say it, and we're far right fascists.
Yeah. So we live in Orwellian. Our society is Orwellian.
Yes.
And I'll give you a blatant example of that for our UK listeners. The truckers, at the beginning of their protest in Ottawa, the blockade, the media and these crooked politicians were going on about some neo-Nazi flags and their linkage to neo-Nazis, which was never confirmed. But then we find out that the government of Canada has been funding, training, arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine for several years, maybe going back to 2014. You see the utter hypocrisy, double standards, and people are getting played. It comes back to division. But I want to share some basic facts on Ukraine. That in 2014, the US sponsored, instigated a coup, which was involving these neo-Nazis in Kiev. And they overthrew the government there, and that set the chain of events in operation. It was instigated by the National Endowment of Democracy, which is an extension of the CIA. It's well documented. There's a beautiful documentary, Ukraine on Fire, by Oliver Stone. I highly encourage everyone, if you haven't watched it, take your time to watch it. These neo-Nazis, and NCA does not support neo-Nazis, even though we're called neo-Nazis. Can you believe it? In this Orwellian media, Anne-Marie? They have direct linkage to Hitler. They kill Jews, all kinds of other ethnic groups. And that the Western deep state is funding in bed with them. Those are the facts. But most importantly, in Donbass, through Western funding, lethal aid, Anne-Marie, they've been bombing innocent areas there, innocent people. And based on our estimates, about 14,000 people have perished. As far as we know, the Ukraine and the deep state West was planning to take over the Donbass. And that's why Russia initiated, they preempted them, Anne-Marie. This is arrogance, as you said, but it's beyond that. This is part of the unipolar world. It's called unipolar rules-based world order. It's crumbling, everyone. The Western sanctions have failed. The ruble is strong. The revenues going into Russia are at all-time high for oil and gas because of the commodity prices, Anne-Marie. It's a boomerang effect, and it's hurting people in the UK, Canada, Australia, US, you name it, all over Europe. Is this according to plan? I don't know. Is it a miscalculation? But it's happening. This thing is completely botched. Now they're turning on Zelensky, Anne-Marie, now. The deep staters. Biden's trying to distance. Because guess what? Russia is about to take over the entire Donbass. Then they're going to head west and take over Odessa. Ukraine's going to have nothing left. Like they're going to be cut off from the Black Sea, you name it. But the reason it's taking a long time there, Anne-Marie, The Western deep state has been funding them. They've been entrenched. They have all these defensive, like trenches, trench after trench, really fortified. So Russia's being, very slow and methodical, patient, but they're wearing them down, right? So as far as we're concerned, Russia's won both the economic war and the military war. This is another debacle like Afghanistan. These are the idiots people keep electing. What
Yeah.
is wrong, Anne-Marie?
Uh,
So no. This is what we say now. Why are you supporting people who are harming you? Why? Why aren't you supporting people who want to help you or are going to benefit you or going to make your life better? Why? You see,
it's very
Emery?
frustrating, and I can feel your frustration. I really can.
No, but it's insane. It's
I know
insane
it
what's
is.
going on.
I know it is.
Like
Literally,
these stupid conservatives here, like there's no such thing. It's a programming. Don't even label yourself. Don't demean yourself. Be free. Don't use any labels. Right?
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think fear. I mean, you sound like a person who sort of understands the human condition or is interested in the human condition. We are frightened creatures, human beings. We are full of fear, and that fear can be manipulated. Governments hire psychologists. They have teams of psychologists to inform them what to do to control people, because the psychologists understand how we as human beings operate. And we are frightened. We're frightened of change. We're frightened of admitting the truth. A lot of people just don't want to acknowledge that they are governed by those who hate them. You saw this a lot during the lockdown period. They wouldn't do that to us. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. Do you really trust governments? Every government, the very concept of government has been corrupt for as long as we have recorded it. The governments lie, it's what they do. But people feel safer believing in the order of things. They believe in a just world.
Yeah.
They believe in an ordered world. And if they step outside of that, if they understand that the world isn't just, that it is actually not ordered but chaotic, that we are governed by people who don't actually care about our well-being, they don't want to acknowledge that. That's frightening. That's fearful. It's much safer over here where everything is in order and there is justice and there is truth, and people don't want to step outside that and admit what the world is really like. It frightens them. That's why.
Well, our message, Anne-Marie, is we're not naive. We're not saying we're going to form government. There's way too many programmed people. There's way too many people who are live in fear and ignorance by choice. Everything we do at NCA, Anne-Marie, is about awareness. If we can get a critical mass of a decent size, then we can talk about doing meaningful change. But until then, all we can do is raise awareness, Anne-Marie.
I'll tell you what, Steve, if I were you, I would think about going into government, because if you don't think you can go into government, you won't. Think, plan big, think big. Because people are frightened, yes, but there can come a time where people want to be led as well. It's part of their fearful condition. They want strategies, they want leadership, they want to be told where to go and what to do. When there's a disaster, people look around and say, someone tell me what to do. So what you can have are social shifts where people will still be frightened, but they'll be frightened of something else.
Yeah.
And they'll be looking for a leader to take them over here. People are led. That is the human condition.
What we
See yourself as the next leader, leading them in a different direction.
Yeah, but we're leading by example. We're leading by our integrity, by the issues we address. No one, not a single entity in the Canadian political spectrum touches NCA. So, Anne-Marie, if anyone sees us and then they look at what's called so-called conservative, there's no comparison. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to give another nugget to our people. And most people who are listening here are, I'm assuming they're educated, not necessarily formally, but you understand a lot of these issues. But I did meet a gentleman yesterday. I was trying to provide some leadership with him, Anne-Marie.
Mm.
But my message to him is, don't follow what these career politicians, deep state politicians are saying. Look at what they're not saying. Focus more on what they're not saying, and that will tell you everything you need to know, Anne-Marie, right?
Yeah, it's
Because
certainly.
what happens every 4 years, they come around and
Mm.
they try to tell people what they want to hear, right?
Mm.
And they smudge it through, but there's so much they leave out, right? They they're actually exposing themselves. But people have to have a critical mind. You got to look at what they're not saying. Look at same with the media too, Anne-Marie. What are they not saying? What are they not sharing? Like you said, they don't even talk about NATO expansion,
Mm.
do they?
Not once have I heard it. Not once.
So this is Orwellian.
Mm.
George Orwell is a famous writer, 1984, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to mix him up with Huxley.
My,
Huxley was very good too.
but of
But
course, so just on one point, so what was the ideology in place in Orwell's 1984?
that's an excellent question. Excellent question.
INGSOC, it was called. The party
Oh,
was called
Insoct.
English Socialism. That was what 1984 was. It was a socialist communist state.
Controlling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he called it a socialist state. I would go further. I think socialism is communism light, but we're not going to communism light. We're going to a kind of communism, a strange corporate communism. But these are all of the things that we're seeing now: censorship, this manipulation, this propaganda, this inconsistency, these lies. This is similar to this rewriting of history, this demonization, this racial attacks. And I'm not being dramatic when I say this. The language used to discuss white people is pre-genocide language. It is. All of this, tearing down statues, all of this is very, very similar to the beginning of Mao's China. Very similar.
Yeah.
And very similar to 1984. In 1984, you had something called the 2 minutes hate, where everybody had to join in. So you had a vilified person, in this case, you and I, or anyone who dares to stand up and tell the truth. They're put in the corner, and everyone is told, you have to shout, traitor, traitor, at that person. And if you don't shout it loud enough, if you don't condemn them strongly enough, you yourself are at risk of taking their place. Now, this is why if you talk about any of these issues, you'll be called far right, you'll be called racist. That's the 2 minutes hate. So the racist is put in the corner, and everyone is obliged to shout at them. If you don't shout at them, you could end up over there yourself. And that people are so afraid of ending up where we are that they won't even dare to tread enough to listen to us. I don't want to be racist. Look what happens to racists. If I listen to them, I'll be a racist. So I'm going to actually join in, and I'm going to persecute to make sure that I don't get persecuted. This is communism. This is 1984. And 1984 was describing communism. We are rapidly, I say we are rapidly hurtling towards communism. I'm not sure that we're not already there. The economy perhaps is just about teetering still on a free market capitalist economy, just about. But the next step, the big one, is to push us into a communist economy.
Yeah. I would argue. Yeah, I would contend it's a global AI technocracy premise on global governance. And this is all linked to the WEF and what's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the so-called Great Reset. And we've done a lot on this, Anne-Marie, because it's the bigger overlapping.
Yeah.
And it's linked into what's called the unipolar rules-based world order, which is just another form of it. And what we see in Russia, Ukraine is this unipolar world hitting heads with Russia, which is a sovereign national state that has a lot of pride. It's a very patriotic state now. Do not confuse it with the Soviet Union. Russia has don't believe anything they say about Putin. You could argue he's done amazing work with that country regardless. They have very low debt, extremely low taxes. If you're productive in Russia, you will do very well, Anne-Marie. Just so you know, I'm not no country is perfect, but they're a sovereign national state. And what's happening is, Anne-Marie, is there's a multipolar world emerging. And I'll give you one example of it. Well, there's Brexit, which is a new trading bloc with China, Russia, India, Brazil, and Iran, South Africa. But there's a new G8 now, Anne-Marie. That's including, I believe Turkey's in there too, Iran, Russia, China, India. But they have higher, 24% higher GDP per purchasing power than the old G8, G7. So it's a very powerful bloc. But China is the second strongest economy in the world. It's the world's manufacturing sector, Anne-Marie. It's only going to get stronger. This is a new world that's emerging. I'm just telling you, at NCA, we support a multipolar world because we think it'll be, we don't want a unipolar is like ultimate tyranny, where you have like a one world government, right? Global governance. And that's what we're having now. You know, I couldn't believe what they said, Anne-Marie, what they're coming up with. They're talking about getting a buyer's cartel against Russian oil. And we're gonna cap Russian oil price and demand that they pay at a certain. That is tyranny. That's thievery, Anne-Marie. It has nothing to do with free markets and capitalism.
Well, those things.
But this is what's coming. People are so asleep in Canada. Most people are asleep, afraid, programmed. They're divided. So this is the challenges we face, Anne-Marie. But we love what we're doing. At least we're expressing ourselves. And that's positive. And we're trying to help people. That's all you can do.
We already do. You know, there are people out there who are so lonely is the only word. They can't speak openly. They can't express themselves. When the politicians have their way, they won't even be able to express themselves online because our government is trying to get rid of anonymous accounts online. You know, so they won't even be able to do that. But so if we provide the sanity that people are looking for, that already is a help. We're already helping people. All we can do is stick to the truth, stick to our principles of open discussion, facts, evidence, and our commitment to our country. I mean, I am pro facts, I'm pro truth, I'm pro evidence. I just want the truth, and I would like some consistency in application of policy as well. But I want countries to. You cannot come along and wipe out countries and expect there not to be a problem, and expect people not to react. People have a deep emotional connection with their countries, and they will die and kill for their countries. So we cannot just wipe that out. But that is what they have slowly been doing since the end of the Second World War, is to bring an end to the concept of a nation in itself, and particularly Western nations. Now, you mentioned about the Ukraine and Russia war, that the countries suffering, the people suffering are in the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, the Western world, in other words. That's not, there is incompetence in here, of course there is, but there is a definite plan to bring down the Western world. There has to be. And the reason is that we have been the richest and the freest people in the world. You have to bring down the rich and the free first if you're going to impose global government. They are deliberately taking us down, destroying us, whether it be through mass immigration, dumbing down of education, this propaganda that we are all colonialists and racists and imperialists and all the rest of it, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. They are dismantling us. Western countries have to go because they were, with freedom and money, a wall in front of the globalists. We have to be brought down first and most heavily, because people in poverty are very easy to control. People who have their own money, their own property, not so easy to control. So they are targeting the Western world and bringing it to its knees. That is definitely no accident.
Yeah, I would concur that as well. And that's a really tough one for people to accept, because we were talking about fear and embracing fear. That's a real tough one. But the facts point that out.
Yeah,
And you listed a bunch there, and Russia is a threat to it as well.
yeah.
Obviously, China too. I was looking at one of the comments. I just want to comment, if we have a few more minutes, Anne-Marie.
Yeah.
So communism, in our opinion, socialism, communism are just means for the globalists. People need to realize that. When I said there's an global AI technocracy, it's all going to be based on AI drones, digital currency, digital ID, AI machines, right? So, and part of the mechanism to control socialism, UBI, communism, UBI, right?
Yeah.
The center point is global governance, as Anne-Marie stated, and she made a really good point there. Free, independent people are a threat to this agenda without question. And so is a country like Russia now, what it's developed into. Fiercely independent, sovereign, patriotic state. And the good news, Russia is winning that, and hopefully they do win it. I feel bad. We have to point this out. We're not against Ukrainian people. They are getting used. It's tragic what Zelensky and his regime has done to them. Puppet regime, being just a proxy of the U.S. Anne-Marie. Ukrainian people are basically a doormat, worse than a doormat right now. And all these arms coming in, Anne-Marie, they're guaranteed that more Ukrainians are going to die and more of the country is going to be destroyed. This conflict did not have to happen. It may be linked to arrogance, geopolitical plans, expansionism of NATO, the arrogance. I don't understand it. Underestimating Russia, maybe, Anne-Marie. I don't know. Maybe it's a trigger to bring down the West. Because look at the sanctions, they boomerang right back, right? So I don't have all the answers, and
No, me neither.
and you pointed that out. All we can do is get people thinking. I'm kind of torn on that. I know there are plans in place, Anne-Marie. I know the Bank of Canada is working on digital currency right now with MIT. I know they're working on a national digital identity. Those are facts.
Yes.
I know the puppets in Ottawa just legislated UBI, universal basic income. Those are facts. I know the Conservatives in 2015 in Canada adopted UN Agenda 2030 in 2015. UN Agenda 2030 is the national framework for this great reset. I know the conservatives in 1992 adopted UN Agenda 21, which is the global framework for this agenda, right? Those are some basic facts that we can follow. We know there's mass immigration. We're not against immigrants, Anne-Marie, but we're concerned about it from an economic standpoint. If we're going to lose up to 40% of our jobs, and maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, why are all these people coming in? Is the purpose just to put them on UBI?
It's to cause chaos in your country.
Yeah, well, that's what they're doing.
And to bankrupt, to further erode your money.
And what they're doing, this is getting worse, everyone. These puppet politicians, the Justice Minister, the current one there in Ottawa, came out and said you have no absolute right to property. And then we can link it to the Bank of Canada made a statement. Oh, the mortgage rates are going to go up, potentially up 50% in the next 5 years.
Wow.
So people aren't going to be able to, they're going to lose their home. Like, you start to connect the dots, Anne-Marie. You see what I'm saying?
Well, if you own something, then you have some power.
But I'll tell you, there's no absolute right to privacy in Canada. It's an illusion. They have a privacy commission. It's just a front. If you look at the Canadian Charter, there's no absolute right to any freedom, any right in Canada. And it's section 1. There's a caveat there. Says these can be, these can be canceled out, Anne-Marie, under certain conditions. And they did it during the lockdown, right?
I saw
So
that.
what they did during the lockdown, they froze people's bank accounts, Anne-Marie, some people. They threw them in jail. They smeared them in the media. And some of them went on a no-fly list. So what are they doing, right? We know what they're doing. They're intimidating others. You're using them as an example, right?
And then the same man had the gall to talk about democracy in the Ukraine.
Yes. So that's just an illusion because it's
in Ukraine. What about defending Canada?
This is part of all the Orwellian doublespeak, because the foundation of this Ukrainian regime right now, puppet regime, is based on a coup. So, which is 2014. It's well documented. Watch Ukraine on Fire. It's a very good documentary on that. And it shows how this thing evolved and how these neo-Nazis were used. It's quite sickening. There's utter hypocrisy. I don't want to dwell on this, but from our standpoint, Anne-Marie, the better we know reality, the better we can deal with it and react to it and go forward. If we're not embracing that, then how can we make good decisions, right? How can we provide good solutions? So I don't want to sound overly negative, but to me, it's important to understand your environment, right? What you're dealing with. It's quite atrocious, Anne-Marie. I wish George Orwell was alive. It'd be very interesting.
He would never have come up with it. He'd be shocked. He'd never have come up with this. It's
with the technology side to it, right?
Huh?
The technology side to it, the facial recognition.
All of it. All of it.
Yeah, the surveillance state, London, cameras everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So it's a surveillance state. They're putting up 5G towers all over the UK, which is feeding that grid, isn't it? Right?
If you say so.
Because 5G is it's giving the processing speeds to do digital currency.
Of course.
Right? Right? So all
Yeah.
this digitalization is linked to 5G, right? They can't do it without that.
Right.
So, but I think we're going to wrap it up because we have other schedules going on. Do you want to add anything in conclusion, Anne-Marie?
I would ask people who are new, who are seeing me for the first time, to go to my website, forbritain.uk. Like you, Stephen, we need support. We need grassroots support. We need as many people to support us as possible, and even people in Canada. If you can help us, support us in any way, please do. forbritain.uk.
Yeah, just remember, just as a registered party, I know a Canadian can't contribute to you without violating, right?
No, we have
Yeah.
international membership.
Yeah, because we can't, as a registered party, we can't receive foreign donations. It's, I guess it's another
I think
rule.
we can't either, but we can have an international membership which
Yeah.
people can contribute through.
Oh, they can become a member
Yes, we have an international membership.
without
With people from all over the
contributing.
world in our international
Oh,
membership.
that's a
We
really
do.
good idea. That's something we don't have, but we should look into doing.
We have a lot of support around the world. Believe it or not, we have members in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and Iran, and
Wow.
we really do. Yeah, yeah.
Good
A
for
lot of
you.
people
Good
in
for
those
you.
countries, don't like how they are forced to live, and they like that we're quite outspoken about the reason why they live the way they do. So we have a lot of support around the world. But I would
That's
ask
excellent.
anything at all. Just go and read, share, tell your friends, anything. The more people who know about us, the better. And
Exactly.
I will mention you in my live stream on Monday
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
I'll do
Hopefully
that.
we can do something maybe in the future.
Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, let's stay in touch. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we'll get to these comments. Thank you for contributing today.
Thanks very much for having
Thank
me.
you.